So let's continue working on TipCalculator example. At the end of previous lesson, we created project. In this project, we created some screen function. In the screen function, we displayed title. It wasn't hello world title, it was TipCalculator word. We changed font, we changed color, we centered this, and it's horizontally on the screen. We added padding, and this was the end of the lesson. We ran it out of time. So I figured out that if we keep going with this pace, we will stay with this layout for a while. So I'm picking a different approach. I added extra code for the layout. So we are not typing this together in class, because it is quite long and tedious. Now I want you to clone this into a separate folder. And I will explain code that I added, instead of standing in front of you and typing all the things. And of course, I will explain meaning of parts on it. And this code is not working. It is just shell on the screen that displays stuff. It has zero functionality. It does have extra calculational function to calculate tip, but it's not connected to the screen, so it leaves as isolated piece of code. So I will explain that one. Right? So let's clone it into separate folder. Do not clone it into the folder that is already existing stuff in it. So I click code, copy, and I'm cloning this with Android Studio. So I open Android Studio, and I know new, get from version control system, Control V, and I have this already, so I'm changing this to a different folder. So it is not the same. Make sure it's not the same for you. So it's add something to it. It doesn't have to be name of the project. Okay. Let me make sure that there is nothing in the folder, so it doesn't exist. Just 1 second. It is in projects, Android. So it's, I have TipCalculator3 and TipCalculator3 compose of Android. I don't have just TipCalculator3 Android. So definitely it has to be empty. Otherwise, you will mix two projects together. OK? Let's click clone and just wait and say trust project. Close. And it is cloning and building. And I will explain differences right now, what I added. Here it is. Now, at the previous lesson, we learned that about resources, and strings must be inside of string XML file. When I type a title TipCalculator, I didn't put it into string because it is kind of two-step process. You type it as a string, and after this, you click combination of click extract string, and it goes into string XML. Another choice is to type it directly into string XML and pick it from there. So let's do some demo how it would go. So in my Java main activity, you see there are extra code here. Right? I will explain what is going on. So what is, when you open project, you see, sometimes you see like a string, but with green background. This Android Studio is telling you what is inside of the resource picked from string XML. It is not actually string in the code. If you click on it, it will show actual code. It says get string resource with ID r TipCalculator header. All right? Okay. So if we go to string resource, we will see that there is a TipCalculator header. Here it is, TipCalculator. Okay. So what is R? R dot. R dot, it's a class created automatically based on the resources. So it's a system is processing resources and creating some code for you. R dot, it's a generated class. Okay. And this is, what is R string, blah, blah, blah. This is integer. It's an ID of a string. This is how a system is matching strings to Kotlin code. Remember that strings are replaceable according to preferences for the user. It will keep the same ID for different languages. This is why when language preference is different for the user, it will pick it by ID from different file. So this is integer referring to string in the resource. Okay. So what I want to do is just to do quick demo, just type sample string, okay? And now, previously we had header here like TipCalculator. You can leave it like it is, it will work, but it's not, this will be one language application. You cannot switch between languages. But if you move mouse on top of it, you will see bulb, and eventually it will have option extract string resource. Click on it, it will give you option how to create what would be ID name inside of that file. You can keep what you like, or this, or change it to what you like. Since it's part of the name that you will be using, it cannot contain spaces and special characters. It should be valid name of a variable. Okay, and you see what it created. R string resource to the sample string, and sample string is somewhere here, right? Where it is, it edited here. All right. So this is how to extract strings. You just type string what you like. After this, it gives you clue, bulb, extract string, and it goes there. You don't have to type this. Okay. So this is how I edit them. Now I want to go back to my, it is resources in main activity. So I roll back my changes, so it disappeared here, and now it goes to TipCalculator header. So this is how to go back to previous commit. You click roll back, you select what you want to roll back, and it will roll back. Okay. So I just didn't want to have like sample text instead of this. Next, where we stop it. In the previous lesson, we didn't have this and this. We created calculator screen, modify a fill max size, padding 32 to add extra padding around it. And this was a label, except I extracted string. I picked color here. Not from resource, I went here in theme and I created color as extra entry this way. So I decided to stick to my previous idea to add color resources because I can easily copy paste. So I already copy-pasted colors for future, so it can be borrowed. So we don't have to type it and look it up. So where these colors are coming from? These colors are coming from material design website. You type material.io, and by default it goes to material 3. This is default for Android right now. When I was teaching this course in October of previous year, it was the time of switching from material 2 to material 3. So this was the reason why libraries are different right now from October. If we compare appearance of TipCalculator3 with TipCalculator2, that is using libraries from October, I didn't change it, look is different because it's different design, different colors, different design on the screen. So I picked colors not from material 3, I picked colors from material 2, because material 3 doesn't have a palette, it has fancier system. So I picked this from material 2. So if we scroll it, we eventually see link to material design 2. And in material design 2, there is option to find colors. Where is that? Component design, probably design. So let's click design and see, and eventually lay color system. And in color system, it tells you a lot about colors, how to make it nice next to each other. And eventually, it will be palette. So why do I show you? Because this is super useful if you need to pick a nice looking color. And they made sure that these colors look nice next to each other. So it is great resource not just for Android programming. It is when you build a website, you can pick a color because picking color is not easy, you know. So this is where I pick colors for essentially anything where I need to have a color. It is in Material Design 2. Material Design 3 has fancier system for colors. Okay. So this is where it's coming from. All right. So I picked these things and I used names from material design. And it's not my idea, they use the same from material design 2 names. They also added black and white here. Okay. And these pieces are duplicated also here. Okay. Because themes for composable need this kind of color. They are 100% compatible because this is produced by pick color from this source. So in main activity, you see I set color from this source, and I pick it and it created color. Previously, we used color with constructor, right? Now, they changed something, and what they changed? They changed default theme, because theme is from material design, and it used to be 2 by default. Now they changed it to 3. So I couldn't copy paste entire code from October. I had to edit it, so it's not the same code. One of the things I noticed in the morning today. So when I was playing with it, somehow this became default now. So this is not doing anything. Fill max size. So we can experiment with it, and this is what we will do first. We will experiment what is going on. With removing things and changing things, it appears like this became default. So at least in this particular part, it's not doing anything. So we will just remove it. So this is what we had, essentially, except now it is coming from string resource, and color is also coming from color resource. This is where we ended. And obviously, I added these 2 functions later, but this is our stopping point at the previous lesson. Except color is coming from resource and string is coming from string resource. Okay? So let's build and refresh and see what we have to make sure it looks the same. So build and refresh. Yeah, so this is the padding. I feel it appears like it is filling max size, but it's not really doing anything in terms of visual appearance. So if I comment it out, it's still the same. It's loading up to date, it's still the same. Now, where is this fill max size is coming from? When I was going through tutorials on, this is a course what I mentioned, video course, long and quite, I encourage you to at least go through at least the beginning. If you feel uncomfortable, it will help definitely. And they will always making fill max size for screen. And I was just taking this like as supposed to be. And it appears like probably because they changed the API from material 2 to material 3, now it becomes default, so it's not doing anything. So, okay, fine. What is this is doing? Center horizontally is center, first it's centered at this. So now I want to uncomment these two to show what is this spaced by means. Okay. So I uncomment calculator input, and it is rebuilding. So it is this box. So what can we learn? We can organize stuff by separating into different functions. And this is one of the way. Obviously, this is a lot of stuff. It's not just title. This is title. Where is the title? This is title. This is text box input. This is radio button input. Another text in switch box. We'll go through that. But so we can organize things on the screen by separating into functions. And this separation into functions may help you if we want to rearrange screen when we rotate it, right? So this original idea to make it like horizontal path, unfortunately it didn't fit, so I had to change code later. And what is calculator outputs? It is this. So let's wait. And here it is. So let's play with these things. Right? So obviously, let's do horizontal thing. It's easier to explain. So instead of center horizontally, we can have other options. And start and even center vertically. I have no idea what it would mean, center vertically here. Okay, so end means it is right. It's like end of the screen to the right. It means right in the languages left to right. Okay, and start, it means left in the languages written from left to right. If we switch language preference, it will be vice versa. So this is the meaning of it. So let's try start. It's reloading. You see, it means left in default profile. Okay, so let's end. You think. You know what it means now, right? It means right. So I'm changing this to center horizontally. Let's see what is vertically. No, it doesn't compile, so it's not applied to vertical box. To column, it's not for column. So center horizontally, okay. So this is the centering inside of the column. This is by far more interesting, this one. Now it is spaced by 32. It is space 32 here and space 32 here. If we want adventure, so I cut it out, we can have everything at the center. So let's wait. Here it is. Okay. So it clumped everything together at the center, but it doesn't mean that we cannot have gaps. We can have gaps. Because we can add padding to those elements, and it will create spaces based on padding. But now it is clumping everything together at the center, but we can add gaps with padding to those elements. And padding is modifier padding you already saw. So this is way how, so it's not starting from the top, it's kind of stuff in the center. There are other things also interesting to look at space between, space around, and space evenly. Space between, it will try to put first element at the top, last element at the bottom, and middle will be kind of in the middle. And other things will be rearranged. Okay? So let's try to space between. See? First to the top, last to the bottom, and other things will be spaced evenly, but we have only one. Okay? And we have other options in space around, and play with it and see what it means. Space around and space evenly is slightly different. Space around gives equal space around of every element. It means you have bigger gap between internal elements because you add space from the top and from the bottom. In space evenly, it gives even space to the top and space in between. Okay, let's see. Okay. So this gap is equal to this gap is equal to this gap. This is space evenly. In space around, it will give equal space around every element. It means at the top you will have less space. And at the bottom you'll have less space, twice less space. I don't think this is nice. Okay, this is kind of nice, right? Too. We can have it space evenly. Why not? Okay, let's keep a space evenly. Why not? Decent choice. No, let's go back. Okay. Let's go back. So I'm going back to paste. I cut it at spaced 32. I still think this is better, although we have okay, now you know what it means, so you can play with it. So this is the meaning, and we have a column. Logically, if we have a column, maybe we can have a row as well, right? Composable provides three simple layouts: a column, row, and box. A box is for specific option to overlap things. You cannot overlap items in a column or row because they will be next to each other. But in the box, it may overlap. For example, you center big element, then you center small element, and you get kind of one piece on top of another thing, like a smaller on top of a bigger. And this way you can overlap. It doesn't have to be centered, but it's a box is designed for overlapping things. Or if it is just one element, it's not overlapping anything, it is just one element. What about other things? They recently added constraint layout, which is extremely flexible. You can do fancy things. Unfortunately, you have to type a lot. And this was added after my previous iteration of the course in October. So it was added in the end of previous year, beginning of this year. So it's new. It was Constraint layout, sorry, it was constraint layout, constraint layout. Constraint layout is borrowed from view system, and in the view system you have a support by dragging and dropping things. You don't have a support here, you have to type. Additional thing, they told us that creating layouts is a lot simpler than in view system, and this is why they don't provide a lot of layouts to you. And so they assume that we can create them if we want. Yeah. Okay, eventually we will, but not right now. So right now we are sticking to simple things like columns and boxes. Okay? Columns, rows, and boxes. Next, you see this piece, which is calculator inputs. Has some kind of frame that looks like a card, right? Kind of stuff that contains things like a card. And this is indeed card. This is it. Okay? So card is composable function that can contain other things, and this card contains column. Obviously, this card contains column of the stuff. Right? So card can have elevation, and elevation may change. Elevation may change, may be changed by your code. When you do some clicking, so this card will appear selected. How elevation looks on the screen? By shadow. If shadow is bigger, it means it is popped out of the screen, so it creates bigger shadow behind. So I changed this to 4dp. You can increasing this number will increase shadow around this box. Shape. This is how to set rounding of the corners of the card. Okay? So I set rounded corner, 8dp, bigger number, bigger radius of the corners. Okay? All right. Next, this card has a column, and this column needs some space around, so these words do not start directly from the edge of the card, because otherwise it will look ugly. If writing starts directly from the edge. Right? So I added modifier 16dp. It is this extra padding. Are you with me? Are you following? Okay. So and now this column contains row. Where's the text? It's the output. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong place. Okay, let's look at output. Since I started to talk about output, this is output. It's easier to explain. This is output. So this column contains two rows, this and this. It is piece of text and another piece of text. Piece of text, another piece of text. So it's easier to explain. Please notice there is no alignment here. I cheated. I didn't create extra layout or any kind of table layout. I just set width to some large number, and I aligned this text to the right. So this is how I got its like appearance of the table. Composable does not provide table layout. We have to manipulate it ourselves. It is not really difficult to create table layout from scratch, but I'm not creating table layout at this moment for simplicity. So in order to create this appearance, I set size of these elements. And wrap content width alignment and alignment move it content of this box to the right inside of the size. So I got appearance like a table alignment, but it's a hack. It's not nice. Please notice that numbers inside of the box I just hard-coded $18 and it is $18 for tip amount and $118 for total. Why do I do it? Obviously, it is not finished code. I'm creating a layout, and I want to see how it would look like when program works. So first step in my approach, this is the best approach, is to work on layout to make sure that what you work, and just hard-code all values that you want to display inside of composable functions. So this is what I did for the first step. So, and it is not my idea. It is based on logical sequence of tutorials from Google. What they do, first they hard-coded appearance, and after this, obviously, this should become a variable, right, at some point. It cannot stay always $118, right? So for this reason, I keep it hard-coded. And obviously, this should come as parameter of this function. Otherwise, how would it get inside? Okay. So next step is to create parameters of the functions for these values to be displayed. Okay. So, but now we are creating layouts. So this is coming from tip amount, coming from string resource. You already saw string resource, right? In this size in, it is just a hack to have it aligned. Okay. This is changing color to purple 500, spaced by, again, the same horizontal arrangement to get this gap in between. Now it is horizontal. That was vertical, now that's horizontal, because it's a row. Okay. I could achieve the same with padding, but I use it the same wood from the top. Okay. Any questions about output? Output is a lot simpler than input, obviously. In output, I have just card and column with 2 rows. Can I continue? Okay. So let's consider this is done. Okay. Calculator output is done. Now let's see what is inside of inputs. Input is more interesting. Calculator input. So I created card that looks the same. So with the same rounding of corners. Okay. And inside of the card, logically, I have column, because this looks like a column. All right. Looks like a column. Inside of the column, I have 3 logical pieces. So for this reason, I created 3 composable functions to separate this around, and now we see what is going on. We have kind of logical structure in front of us. A cost of service input, it takes care of this piece. 100 is hard-coded, it's not passed here. So next step is to pass it as a parameter, right? So it will be displayed whatever is coming from calculation. Not calculation, but it will be passed, okay? Next, whatever is typed in. Surprisingly, it has to go up and down, out of the function and into the function, which is strange, but this is how they design the system. Unless, because if you want to have it as calculation, it's better to make it available outside. I will discuss it separately today. So service quality input, it is this part, service quality, and round tip input, it is this part. Okay. So round tip input is simplest, so let's start with this one. Okay. It is switch box. So this switch box and text. They inside of a row. So I have a row, text, round up tip, and switch box. Okay. Font size, check it true Also, you see it is hard-coded. It is always true. Always check it. And this is lambda function, I will discuss it, that will be called when you try to change the state. And since this lambda function is not doing anything, it's never changeable. It's always checked, okay? And also it is checked hard-coded. So because we're working on appearance now, okay? Next, this is round-up tip. Let's look at this one since it's next step of complexity. And this is cost of service input. Somehow, now it requires experimental material design 3 API. Now, when I was doing this with 2, it didn't require. Now it is forcing us to say that it is where it's experimental. So text field. In this case, you see this piece is 1. You see it is cost of service, it is just text field. So this what piece on the top, it's called label. And label will be displayed if there is no value typed in. In this case, label will be in the center. So it is string resource, cost of the service. Value, it is what is displayed inside or typed in. Okay? This lambda function will be called each time when you try to change something inside, like and typing. Keyboard options. When you type, when you try to type on device, like you need to have a keyboard, right? And this tells the system, show me keyboard with only numbers inside. So keyboard type number. When you click on this by finger or by mouse, it will pop up keyboard, and this tells you that it's only numbers. Single line is true, it means you cannot have 2 lines. Obviously, it is 1 line here. And now I wanted to change default appearance of the text, so it appears like in blue. Our font size bigger than default. So I set text style. And this is how to do that. Text style default copy, and I'm copying default text style, and I'm overriding 2 parameters. So copy is it's a method of data class. So text style default, it's probably static object somewhere in text style. So now I'm copying it and by overriding 2 properties. So I made it bigger and it's blue, purple. Okay. And I added padding, so this line does not start directly from the edge. So I got padding here. Okay. Around. And size in, it is this one. Size in, it's minimal width, yeah. Why do I need minimal width? I don't remember, so let's try. So let's try to remove it and see what happens, okay? So I comment out size in, it will reload. Nothing happened. Did it change anything? I think this line became slightly longer, right? So this is probably, I wanted to make it more compact. So let's see. Yeah, everything became longer. So this line is trying to stretch everything to make it large as possible. So otherwise, this box is trying to stretch box outside, and I wanted to make it smaller. So this is why I said size in, minimal box. All right. So let's see what is inside of this selection, this service quality input. In service quality input, I have a column. Padding can be specified all around. If you give one number, it will be all around. If you say specifically at start, top, it will add only padding at the left, start at the left, and at the top. I wanted to avoid extra gap here, so I added extra only top and left. It is just for visual appearance. And also for knowledge how to add padding to just one side, but not all around. Okay. And now this is a column. And this column contains text label and rows. Obviously, I did it with copy pasting because it is a very similar thing. I only replaced text resource. You see, it is text resource. Okay. Also, in this, I added center vertically, vertical alignment, center vertically. So let's remove this thing and see why I needed this. Cut. You see, and now, if I don't have a center vertically, my label next to radio button jumps to the top. Okay, so they are not looking nice. Center vertically, I put it like in centrally vertical position, both. Okay. Right. I'll paste. And this comes always by experimentation. You type it, you don't see what you like, you experiment with it, and eventually you get what you like. Or at least close to what you want to have. All right? So this is about center vertically, about this part. Obviously, as you see, that this is hard-coded. This checkbox is hard-coded. You see, selected true, selected false, selected false. Okay. And this lambda function will be called on click of it, and nothing happens because this lambda function is empty. Okay. Questions? No? So this is explanation of layout. Obviously, typing of it takes a lot, but making this from scratch even longer because you experiment. You like this gap, you don't like this gap, you change this gap, you like this alignment, you change another alignment. So it is quite tedious. And honestly, it is entire evening to do. If it is done from scratch without copy-pasting code, this is entire evening. Several hours, like 2-3 hours, 3 hours most likely. Especially if it's without previous experience. Okay. So let's run this and make sure that it doesn't work. In terms of it shows what it should do, but you will see that it's not actually performing to anything because everything is hard-coded. It is just picture. Okay. So it is just picture. You cannot change selection. You see, you click, it animates. Yeah, I'm about to change, but it doesn't change. You click this, it shows up keyboard, but you cannot type anything because it's not changing. So it's gone. And this is not changeable. It animates, but it's not changing. Why? Because we did it such way, because we want to see appearance and debug the appearance. All right. Any questions at this moment? So in order to do, I want to finish explanation of existing code, and after this we will keep working on the code. So I also copy-pasted things, formulas for calculation, so we don't have to type it. Because it has rounding tip, so it's not really obvious how it's doing. So let's do calculations. So I copy-pasted it. So I defined enumeration type for service quality, and it's also example for enumeration type. What is enumeration type? Simplest possible scenario, you declare constants, and system will number them from 0. So this will be 0, this is 1, this is 2. But we don't have to refer to them as numbers. We refer to them as service quality dot amazing, service quality dot good, and system will replace it with number internally. This way, we don't have to remember what is 0, what is 1, what is 2. Okay. So it is part of the model because I use word model, like model of reality. Okay. So it is a modeling to what is in real life scenario. Then, I want to have some data class, and eventually it will be stored in database, like in history of calculations. So it would be what I will push into database, but it's also return value function that is doing calculation. So function will also return inputs. So, and it is data class, and it is val, it's immutable. Remember that in our previous discussion from design guide from Google, they recommend state classes to be immutable. So it is not explicitly called UI state, but it's kind of close to that idea, right? So it is what is supposed to be displayed. So we have a cost of service displayed, it is double service quality displayed, round-up tip displayed, tip amount. So essentially the state of a GUI, right? So it is not exactly the idea, but it is kind of going into that direction. So we can say it is kind of state of the GUI. We will not use it as a state at this moment. We will make it work today. We will have time to make it work. We have 2 hours. But it is for future. And it is used as a return value of calculate tip function. So calculate tip obviously needs to know cost of service, service quality good, not good, okay. Right? By default, it will be okay. And round-up tip by default true. So this function has one parameter that is required. It is amount and 2 optional parameters. So by default, it is 15% and round tip. So this is the return type of the function tip data. It is return type. A return type in Kotlin, it is after colon. And this is just the body of the function. Okay. What it is returning? It is returning object tip data. It is calling constructor. So this is constructor call, and I provide calculated values by using naming parameters. So it's a name of the parameter, and this is a value. Pass it to the constructor. So this is the idea what it's returning. It is returning tip data object that you saw, and it's creating object by calling constructor. So how does it do calculation? First, it needs to convert enumeration type to actual number, right? Because it says service quality okay, but it cannot use okay, it needs 15% somewhere, right? So tip percentage, it's a private function, this one, that is converting service quality as enumeration type to number. So how does it do it? Remember that if function is short, like one expression, instead of creating body of the function, you can assign formula. And from the first lessons, you learned that when, it's a kind of switch, but when is returning value, and if is also returning value. Right? So service quality is given as a parameter to when, and when is similar to switch in other languages. And when service quality is okay, use this, and this will be returning value of when. So this function is returning double, and this double is determined by when. So as you see that Kotlin language is quite compact, can be quite compact. It can be done with coding return statement explicitly, like you say, service quality OK, return this number. Right? And this will be inside of body, if you want to have body function. And this is shortcut for any function. You can assign formula. And this is like a formula, because it's returning value. Okay? So this is taking service quality and calculating value times cost of service would be tip amount. Now, if round-up tip is true, I'm changing tip amount to rounding up. Ceiling, it is rounding up. Okay. It is original tip amount to round up. Okay. And this is it. And after this, I create tip data object. That is the function is returning. So I separated calculation into function. Okay, with some extra stuff. So I will call this function when I need to do calculation. So this is about existing code. And now we need to play with it, probably. So should we have break, relaxing, some short time break? Or we can continue. So let's have some coding experience, and after this have break, like within 10 minutes, okay? Okay, so. And this coding experience, I have to look it up. Nope. Okay. So let's do some simple exercise before extending it. So as you notice, this is not switchable. Right? So let's make it switchable. All right? So how to do it? So let's do it. Okay. Now we need to talk about state variables. State variables are essential to the system. So this is how system needs to know if it needs to rebuild piece of the screen. So when state variable is changing, system knows it needs to rebuild the screen. It is internal feature of composable. So now I'm creating state variable for this piece. So I'm going to my composables, it is in main activity. I will fold this thing. And where it is, I'm starting with the simplest because it is, yeah, it is simplest. This is the reason why I'm starting. And I'm creating state variable here. Okay. Okay, let's call it round up tip input. Okay. So val and round up tip input. Okay. It's the name of the function. Now I need to create a special type, and type will be mutable state. And it should be remembered. What remember means? This variable will be remembered between function calls. So if this function call it second time, this variable will survive. This is the meaning of remember in this case. Remember. And in remember it's a kind of lambda function. No, it's not lambda function. It's a function that expects lambda function as a parameter. So we have a lambda function as a parameter of it. And this is taking another function called a mutable state of. A mutable state of. A mutable state of. And now we need to provide initialization value, so let's call it true. Okay. So again, this is a state variable, and state variable behaves very specific way in composable system. Composable functions are not regular functions because they describe piece of the screen, and they're called by the system when it's necessary. And system needs to know when it's necessary, and one way to know is to change variable, state variable. If state variable is changing, system is calling this function again. So this is behavior. Okay. This is it is surprising, but this is how it behaves. So this is a state variable, and when it's calling this again, obviously it needs to survive, because it should be the value that is there, right? And it should survive, so this is why we have remember. Now it is mutable state of true. This is initialization. But what is the type of it? A type is not Boolean. Why? Because it's a wraparound Boolean. It's a container that's for the value, and container will notify the system when the value is changing. So system is setting observer to it. So it's observable state. We don't set observer to this variable directly. We rely on the system. So how it behaves? When we declare state variable inside of a composable function, system will set observation to it, right? So each time when we change it, system will call this function again. Okay? Are you with me? Okay. What's the type of it? It is mutable state. Type of it, mutable state of Boolean. I hope I remember correct. So we can always check. So let's how to check. We declare it, and if we don't, if it complains, obviously we're wrong. A mutable state of Boolean. Yeah, so it is correct type. So it is a container that contains Boolean. Obviously, so it is mutable state. Okay? There is also not mutable state, just state. But in this case, we need to change content of it, so it's mutable. So this is my state variable. Now, obviously, this should be displayed, otherwise, because it's not linked to the screen. So it is just a variable living on its own. So where is this? It is this one. Check it. True. I need to link it to content of this variable, right? So instead of true, I'm going with mutable, with roundup tip, this variable, right? Roundup tip input. But this is not Boolean, it's container, right? But container has a value in it, which is Boolean. So now it is matching it. All right. Next, on checked change, this lambda function should change state of this roundup tip. Okay? Because if you try to change it, it won't change, right? Because this lambda function is supposed to change. Okay? So let's do that. We can declare parameter of the function and set it to this. So we can do that. So we can say, well, oops, sorry. kind of new value. This will be new value what is selected, it's off or on. And now I need to assign it to content of this roundup tip input. Roundup tip input dot value, and I assign new value. Okay? So this lambda function, and this is parameter of lambda function, new value, will be called when I try to change it by clicking it. So let's stop it and run it and see how it works or how it doesn't work. Okay? Right? So it restarted. Ta-da! So what do we learn? And how it works? When I try to change it, it calls given lambda function. This is new value. It changes to changes the state of it. And when state variable is changing, system is calling this function again, and it is displaying value on second call. All right. Obviously, in order to do calculation, this should not be local variable to roundup tip. Otherwise, you don't see it to make calculation. So this function, this variable is supposed to be actually outside of this function, not inside. So this creates extra complexity because you need to pass this value outside. Okay? So let's have 10 minutes break and continue with this magic after break. Any questions right now? So this is essential for understanding how composable works. And after break, I will quickly repeat this part, and we will continue. Not by typing, but explanation. Okay. So I will stop recording for 10 minutes. So before the break, we made this switch box work by declaring state variable inside of roundup tip input. So this piece of the screen, it's roundup tip input. So how it works? State variables, it's a container with some data inside. And this container is observable by the system. We don't have to, inside of compose functions, we don't have to set observer like explicitly. System will set observer on this container, and observer will react by redrawing piece of the screen associated with the given function. So it will call function again. Just because this function call it again, it has to be, remember it, this mutable state of. So it is inside of remember. So mutable, these values inside of containers, observable containers, state containers, will survive repeated function calls, unlike regular variables. What did we notice? We noticed that this value is inside of the function, right? It is not. It means we cannot access it from outside, which is really bad choice in this case because we need to do calculation based on the value of this variable. So we cannot do it this way. We need to move it outside of this composable function. So moving state variable outside of composable function, it is standard process in this kind of programming, and this is why it's standard. Just because it's standard way of doing it, it has a name called hoisting. So moving state variables outside of composable, it is called hoisting state variables. So next step is to move it outside, and where to move it. Let's see where is the logical place to put. I would say it is here. We may put it even further, but this is the place where it will work if we move. Because in order to update outputs, I need to know the value, right? And value will be passed into calculator outputs. So we can move it even further, for example, to view model or whatever, but this is a place, like soonest place, where we'll make it work, because we need to pass calculated outputs here. So what I do, I will just say copy it. I will delete it afterwards here, obviously. For now, I just copy it. And I paste it into screen, calculator screen. All right. Now, these values supposed to be reaching calculator inputs, and eventually should reach this round trip input. Okay. So logically, this function should have at least variable to pass it down, right? Because I need to display it. So I need to declare this variable, or let's call it the same way, like round up tip input. Round up tip input, but I'm not passing container. I'm passing Boolean, because container lives outside, right? And it will signal this function to redraw everything below. Why do I need to redraw everything below? Because I need to display calculation. This is logically. When container will change, and you need to display the result of the calculation. All right? So I'm passing this as Boolean. Why it's not happy? Round up tip input. Too many arguments, of course, because when this function is declared, it doesn't have this parameter, right? By the way, I'm passing this without Boolean, because it's a value, right? But I want to pass it as Boolean, so it is dot value. So this is what I want. I don't want to pass container, I want to pass just value. Container lives outside, and it will signal everything to redraw when this is changing, which is logical, right? So I'm passing Boolean. So now calculator inputs function expect round up tip input, which is Boolean. Calculator inputs function expects round up tip input, input value, which is Boolean. Now it is Boolean. Now it is in right place because it is declaration of the parameter. And it's at the top now it's not complaining when I pass it, right? I pass value as Boolean. Now I'm in calculator inputs. It is receiving round up tip input as Boolean. And so I need to pass it further, right, in this function, because I'm moving container outside. So I'm passing it here, round up tip input. Now it's not gray because it is used, but it is underlined in red here because round up tip input function needs to have this as a parameter, right? So I'm moving this down to round up tip function as a parameter. So I'm scrolling. Where is that, my round up tip function? Oh, here it is. So it needs to have this as a parameter, right? So Control C, Control V. Okay. Now it's complaining because I have the same name, right? So this should be gone now. Now I have another issue. Obviously, now it is a wrong type. This is supposed to be Boolean, but not now. Round up tip is Boolean, so there's no dot value because it used to be container. Now it is parameter of the function. So I delete dot value, and this part is happy. But this is not happy. This lambda function is supposed to change container that lives outside, which is a issue, right? It cannot reach that container from inside of the given function. It means the lambda function must be a parameter of it. Okay? So this function is actually should be given as a parameter. So you pass lambda function as a parameter, and this lambda function is changing something outside. What would we do? It's changing content of that container. Okay? So I need to have another parameter, which is lambda function. And let's call it like on change, because it's changing, okay? Let's call it on change, logical. On change, and now I need the type, and the type is lambda function. So I need to declare type lambda function. This lambda function is receiving Boolean as a parameter. So it is in parentheses, I'm say Boolean, because it is receiving Boolean as a parameter. And it is not returning anything. So this is why after arrow, I say unit. Unit means not returning anything. So I want to show just code. I don't need this preview anymore. So I click this code to get rid of this preview. Now, this function is coming as a parameter. So I'm replacing this with received lambda function, logically, right? Because now this lambda function should live outside. Okay. So I cut this piece. And instead of it, I type on change. And since type is matching, I can pass lambda function as a parameter downstairs to switch box. All right? Now, logically, this parameter now is missing upstairs, right? This should come from somewhere, right? So I need to have something here to pass it down. So I need to declare lambda function as a parameter in order to pass it here. Right? But I shouldn't call on change, because on change is clear here for round up tip input. Right? Because now on change of cost of service, on change of we can anticipate on change of cost of service, on change of quality of input, so we need to have a different name, more informative, right? So how should we call it? So on change of cost of service, no, on change of round up tip, okay? Because in this case, we have other changes, right? So I'm declaring parameter on change of round up tip, on change of round up tip, and type is the same, Boolean unit. Okay. So this lambda function is going downstairs as a parameter. So on change of round up tip is passed here as second parameter on change. Okay? Are you with me? Okay. Now, this lambda function is received as a parameter and passed here as a parameter, passed here as a parameter, but it's not given as a parameter from outside yet, right? So we need to have it as a parameter where? Here, right? So this call is expecting some lambda function here, right? And this lambda function is supposed to change this part. So technically we can just type lambda function here, right? So let's do so, and Okay, plug it. So this needs lambda function that change content to this. And this lambda function is going to calculate the inputs call, this one. So it is last step. So now we need to type it as a parameter. So here it is. What it would be, it is something, remember what it was? New value, arrow, right? So let's type that one. A new value, arrow, and I'm changing content of this box. Round up tip input dot value, copy, round up tip input, value, assignment, new value. Okay, so what did I achieve? I achieved moving state variable to the place where it can be used in calculation upstairs. So I did hosting of one variable, but now I need to do it for other variables as well. I need to, but now I know the logic, right? So I can do this quicker. Right? First, let's check if the idea is working. So I stop it and I run it. Okay. So it is working. So now this variable is living upstairs, and it is redrawing stuff downstairs, so we have switch box. Switch is working, right? So what is next? We can do some shortcut here. You see it is underlined in gray. It means it wants to tell us something. What when it tells us something? Just because lambda argument should be moved out of parentheses. Move lambda argument out of parentheses. What does that mean? Okay, let's try. Just because it's only one parameter, you can put it outside of parentheses, right? Remember that if function has only one parameter, which is lambda function, you can move it outside of parentheses. If, no, not only one. When function has lambda, last parameter of the lambda function is, no, when last parameter of the function is lambda function, you can put it outside of parentheses, this. So this is what they did. It moved outside of parentheses. But this is not what would be nice. Why? Because we will have other parameters. So it's not the last one. So what it told us, it's not the best choice, because we will have other parameters. But we can do extra shortcut. In lambda function, we can use default parameter name. Default parameter name is it. So if we remove this part, we can use word it instead of new value. This will be default parameter name. So let me show. So I'm removing new value. Where's my delete? And I can use it instead of it. So this will be default parameter. Okay. So if you don't, it is just, if your lambda function has one parameter, you don't want to use a name, like new value equal to assignment, you can use word it that will refer to the parameter of the function. Is this clear or no? Yes or no? Okay. So it is just shortcut. But eventually we will move it inside because we will have more than one parameter. It is just clue that should be ignored at this moment. All right. So we did it with roundup tip input and it works. Let's repeat this again for other things. So next candidate, so this is done. This is complicated. Let's do it with cost of service next. Okay, let's move this inside. Otherwise, it irritates me. Okay? Because it's not the last parameter. It tells its last parameter, you can move it outside, there's no point. Okay? So I move it inside. Next, going into cost of service. Cost of service, cost of service. Here it is, cost of service. Now we remember the logic. We need to pass this string from top down. Right? So let's declare a parameter cost of service. Service. And call it, it's a string. And we need the lambda function that will be called when it is changed. So let's call it on change of cost of service. It's lambda function on change of cost of service. Kind of ugly long name. So let me check. Maybe I had a better name before. It is on change because it is easier. It's here. It's on change. It's only one, right? On change, and what is the type? And type is lambda function that receives string, and not receiving and not returning anything. So it is unit. Okay. So this part is going instead of hard-coded 100, right? Because this is value passed down. So it is cost of service. Next. And this on change is called instead of this empty lambda function, right? On change. Now we declared the extra parameters. We broke some code upstairs, so we need to go upstairs and fix this. So going upstairs, it is inside of our in this. You see, we broke it here. So we need to have a parameter. Let's copy paste that. It's easier. Okay? So I'm going down and I'm copy pasting those parameters. Cost of service in this part. Control C. And I'm going here as a cost of service input. Control V. But this is pass it as it is. And this is because I'm changing value. I'm calling function, right? Why it is in red? Because it doesn't know what it is, right? So we need to have something like that here. So I'm creating extra lines. So I have kind of logical separation. And I paste it here. So I need to have a better name for this. You see, now it is on change of cost of service. Right? On change of cost of service. Okay. And this is on change of cost of service. On change of cost of service. All right. Okay. On change of cost of service, on change of cost of service. Later we can rearrange it so it is in some kind of logical order. But let's make it work first. And after this we will play with rearranging parameters. Or we can use named parameters, which is easier. We don't have to rearrange them after that. Okay? We can go with named parameters. Now, this is here, but something at the top is unhappy because this is not passed, right? So this is unhappy because it's missing two parameters now related to cost of service. So I need something like that, but for cost of service. Right? So I'm at the top of calculator screen right here, and I'm creating state variable for cost of service. So val and cost of service input, cost of service input, and it is mutable state. Type is optional because I'm doing assignment. I'm just declaring this specifically to show what is the type. So it is, remember, and now mutable state of, and I initialize it. Mutable state of, and I start with empty string, which is kind of logical. It's empty. Nothing is on the screen. So it is cost of service input, this. Okay. Calculator inputs. So it needs to be here because I'm passing it down, right? So I'm editing calculator inputs function call. Now I have to have cost of service input dot value. So let's move it to add extra line. Cost of service input dot value. And lambda function that will do similar thing, but for cost of service input, right? Cost of service input dot value, assigning it. Now it's happy. All right. So I move it cost of service input upstairs. So now I have round up tip input, cost of service input. They use it, they pass it as values to calculator inputs and lambda functions that will change those boxes, content of those boxes, right? Then calculator inputs receives these parameters, calculator inputs these parameters, and pass it downstairs. Cost of service, it's called cost of service, and this is, let's rename it to cost of service input to have its symmetry. Okay? So it is refactory name, cost of service input. You don't have to rename it. Right? So cost of service input to have symmetry. Then cost of service input goes down to cost of service. Okay? All right? Next, let's stop it, run it, and see if we can type into the box. I run it. And now you see, it's when you click on it, it's empty. You can type things into box. Okay? So this is working, right? So we have, now we have only one thing left, which is the most interesting part. It is radio buttons. Right? Okay? Are you following? So for radio buttons, so let's start from the top now, because now it is easiest to start from the top. Logically, we could figure out that we need to have a val, which is service quality input, right? Service quality input, which will be mutable state of service quality, because it is type of the type of what is selected, right? So val service quality service quality input, which is mutable state service quality. And I do the same manipulation, remember. And inside of remember, mutable state of and some initialization, right? Mutable state of and some initialization. And what would be initialization? Like, let's start with good. Okay. So initialization is good. Service quality and good. So by default, it will be good. Okay. And now I need to link the same with stuff downstairs, right? Are you with me? So I created this upstairs because logically now I'm propagating this down. We already figured out this, right? So going here and I need something like that, but for service. For service quality, right? Service quality input. I'm passing dot value. And for the lambda function, it is service quality input dot value. Service quality input dot value. And I'm assigning it. Obviously, it's unhappy because function doesn't have these parameters yet. Are you following? So now I'm editing parameters of calculator in input to include this stuff. So calculator inputs. If service quality input, type service quality. And I need to make a function on change of service quality. On change of service quality. Quality. And type, it is new service quality. It is service quality, and it's not returning anything. It is unit. All right? Now it's interesting, because previously we had one checkbox, one state box, one text input, one state box, right? to store state. Now we have three of them. So this is different. So we need to figure out logic inside of function when we do the selection, right? But it's not end of the story. We need to pass it here, right? So let's pass the cost of service input. Control-C. Control-V. And pass this on change of cost of service. Control-C. Control-V. Now, it is underlined because this function doesn't have parameters. So we need to have parameters in that function and link it properly to GUI. So next step is to link it properly to GUI. All right? So I'm going to service quality input. Service quality input, it is this one. So we need two parameters. Service quality, which is service quality. OK, let's call it input. Service quality. And second is the lambda function that is receiving, let's call it on change. On change, Okay, on change. Okay. The on change that receiving lambda function parameter service quality not returning anything. Right? So service quality input, and this will be called when change happens. I click some ready button. Am I right? Let me look it up. I'm suspicious that it's not right. Oh, it's right. Okay, let's continue. Now, I need to edit these things and these things to be consistent. Okay? So let's deal with lambda functions first and deal with this afterwards. Okay? So when we click a radio button that is related to amazing, what should we do? We should call on change with parameter amazing. Right? So on click here, we should call on change with parameter, because this is service quality. Service quality amazing. No, amazing. Does it look logical? So when this amazing button is clicked, we call this lambda function and pass service quality amazing as a parameter. Okay? Now let's apply the same logic for service quality good. So on change, and we pass on change, and we pass service quality good. All right? Does that look logical? We call on change with parameter service quality. And when we click service quality ready button good, we pass this value. Okay? And last thing, it is for OK. On change, and we pass service quality OK. Are you with me? All right. Now we need to figure out this hard-coded value to be in sync with this. Right? So when this is supposed to be true, when service quality input equal to service quality amazing. Right? This will make it true. So this should be true when service quality input equal to service quality amazing. When it's not equal, it will be false logically. So I'm assigning logical expression, result of logical expression. So this will become true when it's equal to amazing. Logically, it's supposed to be, right? Okay. Now it looks like it becomes quite long, so I probably need to have a line break, right? Now I'm doing the same logic for this radio button. So this hard-coded true is replaced with logical expression. it should be true when service quality is equal to good, right? So this should be true when service quality input equal to service quality dot good. Okay? And last step, it is for the bottom. That checkbox, are you following? This hard-coded selected true should be replaced when it should be true when service quality is okay. Service quality input equal to service quality dot okay. All right. So let's stop and run and see if radio buttons are working. If they are working, it means we did it reasonable, right? So let's stop it and run it. It's still not compiling. I made mistakes somewhere. Service quality input, cost of, because it's cost of service input. I mistyped it. It is service quality input. Service quality input. And this is on change of service quality. It's wrong thing, right? On change of service quality. Okay. Because I was using prompt and I accidentally selected wrong piece. So let's run it now. Ta-da! Ready button works. Now, what is missing? The data is not passed here, right? So we need to have some parameters going downstairs because our outputs are still hard-coded. Right? So we need to create parameters tip amount and build total for outputs, right? Again, there is no lambda function because data goes in one direction, only into output. Okay? But since it is with $, we need somehow format Boolean into currency. Right? So we need to have some helper function for formatting currency. So let's create that function. So in order to format this as currency, so I'm creating function format currency. Okay? So where's my outputs? So calculate output. So I create function. Function returning string, format currency. Format currency. It will receive a double as a parameter and return string. So let's call it amount, type double, and it will return string. Since it's a short function, we can do just one line. So it is assignment, and assignment is go to next line. Number format dot get currency instance. Get currency instance dot and format amount. So this will create a string with $, rounded till second digit. So it will receive, I will need it inside to convert number into actual value, right? All right, so let's create parameters here for outputs and call it like tip amount and bill total. Tip amount is double, and bill total is double. Okay. Now I will use this function to output it is here, tip amount. So this will be format currency call, format currency, tip amount. All right? I'm using the functions that I just created. And the same for bill total. So now it is not hard-coded here, but we need to pass it from upstairs, right? But it's not very hard because we don't have long chain in this case. We have only one function call. And for bill total, where's my bill total? The same, I'm replacing this hard-coded $118 with format currency, bill total. All right? Now, it's not end because we don't have calculations yet. So we need to pass some value here. Right? So let's leave it alone. We need to do some calculation at this moment because now we need to calculate. So let's look at the logic. When content of these boxes is changing, system will call this function again. Remember, this is the state of the function. So when state is changing, system will call this function again and pick data from it. So let's use this logic. So we can include calculation here, because this will be recalculated when the stuff is changing inside. Logical? I think so. All right? So let's calculate tip data. Tip data, type tip data. Remember, it's a box that it's a return value of my calculation function, tip calculation, tip data. So it is the return of my function calculate tip. Calculate tip. This function expects following parameters. So I use named parameters so I don't make mistake with ordering. It expects cost of service. And cost of service is content of this cost of service input, right? So it is cost of service input dot value. Because it's not a observable box, but it's what is inside. Sorry, it's wrong. Why it's wrong? Because this function is expecting double. But this is not double, this is string. We need to convert. All right? So how to convert it? It's in Kotlin, it's easy. Dot, and it will, now it is a function. Oh, sorry, it's not easy. I need to look up. It is to double or null. When it is not able to convert it, it will use null value. But it's still wrong input because this expects double. So I need to take care of special case null, right? And special case null can be handled with Elvis operator. So when it is really null, just use 0, okay? So if it cannot convert it, for example, it is empty string, cost of service input to double or null will become null, so it will use 0 in calculation. Looks logical, right? Next, second parameter, it is service quality. Service quality, and it is service quality input dot value, and this is type is right, because this is service quality input enumeration. In third parameter, it is roundup tip. Also, type is right because it is Boolean. It expects Boolean. Roundup tip input dot or roundup tip input dot value. So I assign it content of those boxes to parameters of the function. This is just function call, and those are parameters passed there. So it will return tip data when each time when this function is called. And it will be call it each time when content of these boxes is changing. So this is a trick, right? When content and boxes are changing when we change something about inputs. So it will do recalculation each time. So tip data will be updated on each attempt of recalculation, each attempt of change input. So this should be fresh data each time. Right? Since it's fresh data, we can use it here. Right? A tip amount, tip amount, and it is tip data dot tip amount, and bill total is equal to tip data bill total. So now I pass it data from tip calculate function, received from calculate function. Okay? Yes? No. So let's stop it, run it, and see if it is doing calculation. Now it shows zeros. Why? It shows zeros because if cost of service defaults to 0 if it's empty, because it tries to parse empty string, couldn't, result is null, so output is 0. If input is 0, tip is 0, and everything is 0. Looks logical. Now let's try to type something like $25 or $25. Okay. Done. Did calculation. Smaller tip, bigger tip, intermediate looks logical. So let's make something that's easy to calculate. Let's do $100. 18%, so $18. 118, logical, right? 15, 20, logical, right? Changing this, changing roundup tip doesn't do anything unless we do some 34 cents here, right? When we're not rounding tip, it will do some cents in tip. And rounding, get rid of cents, but tip is increasing, right? Logically, right? So it behaves, right? And this is changing also. Right? Now, let's do interesting part. Let's make this piece rotatable. So it is auto-rotate already by default, for me, because I changed this as the previous lesson. So screen is auto-rotatable. So let's try to rotate this thing. First, it goes out of the screen. There's no scrolling. So this is an issue. So this is an issue to resolve. But another issue, it's losing data during rotation. Okay, so it's not perfect yet. One issue, it is not displaying right when it is rotating. And second, it is losing data during rotation. Also not nice. fixing losing data during rotation is easy change, but I don't want to deal with it right now. But I believe it's called just remember save. Let's try. Remember saveable or something. Okay, leave it, okay? Later we will deal with it, rotation preserving data during rotation with special better choice. I don't want to change it to save or savable. Because there is a better way of doing it. We will deal with it using a view model. It's a special class designed to preserve data during rotation. So, in rearranging screen, obviously works. We need to change it such way that it is rearranging. So it will use different functions depending on the width of the screen. And this is way in the future. So let's put it on the hold. And time for questions. So I will create two branches. One branch will be original, like starting. And second, it will be like beginning lesson or end lesson, or something like that.